Welcome to the DNA Talks podcast, where we take on the mission of unlocking the code of your genetics. This season is all about you, upgrading your health, not just on the surface, but down to the root cause. Join us as your clinicians at the DNA company investigate your DNA and beyond. The intention of this podcast is to enhance your lifestyle by changing what is in your control. This does not substitute the medical advice given by your personal doctor, therapist, and other healthcare professionals.
Welcome to the DNA Talks. My name is Dr. Stephanie Nielsen, and I am so pleased today to have our guest, Karen Martel. Karen is the CEO of Hormone Solutions. It's a clinic that offers bioidentical hormone therapy, holistic approach to addressing hormone dysfunction in women, both perimenopause and postmenopause. Karen is a certified hormone specialist, a transformational nutrition coach. She is a distinguished authority in women's weight loss, hormonal health. Now, she has a wealth of expertise on both perimenopause and menopause. And today we're going to talk about how do you know when you're in, how do you know when you're getting out, what do we do? We're going to go through both our personal stories. We're going to go from weight gain to are hormones a right decision for you? And if so, when and how? And then what to do to get your life back together. And with that, I'd like to welcome Karen Martel to DNA Talks. Welcome, Karen.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm like you and we see really eye to eye on a lot of things we've realized very quickly.
We do. Well, I think the neat thing about that is we've also had very similar journeys. Yeah. But, you know, as a scientist, the important thing for me is neutrality. So I love that you're so open to saying, here's the good, here's the bad, here's what people have to choose, and not everything works for everyone. Yes. So let's find what works for you. And the benefit of having, you know, a background in DNA, and I'm a pharmacist by training, understanding why some drugs work for people and some don't, and how their DNA plays in, but how this whole beautiful symphony or whole hot mess of hormones makes it wonderful and challenging at the same time. So
yes, absolutely.
For our audience who doesn't know you, can you tell us a little bit about you and a little bit about your wonderful hormone journey?
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's a long hormonal journey that I have like two parts, because really when I was in my early 30s after having my daughter is when I had kind of my first hormonal storm happen, which I think a lot of women can relate to that. It's like you get pregnant for the first time and you have your first child. And so many women will say nothing went back to the way it was after that.
Yeah, true.
Right? Yeah. And so after having her, I did have several years of a lot of hormonal dysfunction, and it took me to figure it out. Nobody could help me. I was going to my doctor, I was going to naturopaths, and because I was 33 at the time, nobody was saying, hey, it could be your hormones. Instead, I was offered supplements and, oh, here's your sleeping medication, here's your antidepressant, you know, because all of these problems were happening and I was gaining more and more weight, and I was told to just exercise more, eat less, blah, blah. And I just kept getting more and more symptoms, gaining more and more weight. And then finally it was like, this has got to be hormonal. And I went through a bunch of hormone testing, and sure enough, yes, I had hypothyroidism, I had estrogen dominance, I had adrenal issues. It was like this long list, and it took many years for me to reverse all of that, which I did. And I was starting to, you know, sail through my 30s and was feeling amazing, keeping at the same weight for about 10 years. And suddenly in my early 40s, when I had thought at that time, because at that time I was a weight loss nutrition coach for women, and my specialty was weight loss resistance because of what I had gone through. And I am helping all these women, and I'm eating perfectly, my paleo-based diet, doing all these amazing things for my body and able to maintain my weight and health. And then suddenly in my early 40s, but my body decided to just go into an early menopause, and I started to lose my hormones really quickly. I put on almost 20 pounds, Stephanie, within 6 months, which for me was devastating because here I am. I was already out in public. I was on my YouTube channel, and here I am coaching women on weight loss, and they're just watching my face pretty much. Just, yeah. And I just felt like such a fraud. It was a really, really hard time for me. I'm so grateful now that it happened because I've now, been able to help thousands of women with this. But it was this massive wake up call for the second time saying to me, you can be super healthy and doing everything right and still be affected by hormonal loss or hormonal dysfunction. And I think a lot of women really beat themselves up for that, where they think it's them. And I remember doing the same thing, like, okay, I'm not eating well enough. I'm not on the right diet. I'm not exercising enough. And, oh, I'm not now, then it was, I'm not fasting. I'm not doing keto enough or low carb enough. And it just came down to there's, my body's very hormonal, and it has to do with a lot about my genetics. I have discovered so much about my genetics in this time and realized that there's some serious issues in there with my hormones, and I have hypothyroidism. So all of this kind of factored in, and I just came out of this going, I got to start teaching more women about this time, because for me as a practitioner, I didn't even know, I didn't even scratch the surface about what perimenopause and menopause actually entails for most women and what our options are. We're not being told by anybody out there. Like, it's like 90% of doctors and place information online is like, you just got to get through this. It's natural. And you just got to,
Well,
you
yeah,
got to
it's the whole
suffer.
suck it up, suck it up.
Suck
Everybody
it
else
up.
before
It's
you has been
normal,
done it. Why can't you? Which is
right?
so unfair. So
It's
unfair.
so unfair. I always say, imagine if this was a man's problem. Just imagine, would we be, dealing with this the same way? If a man at 45, his penis just started to shrivel up and he couldn't get hard anymore and he got fat, and, would he go to the doctor and would the doctor say, oh, this is just a normal part of life. Use some lubrication, you'll be fine? No, it would never happen. But it's happening to women, and it's still very prevalent, even though there's a lot more coming around like out there on menopause in this space. We're still extremely deficient in quality information about what our choices are for perimenopause and menopause, and that we don't have to suffer. And so I opened up a telemedicine clinic a couple years ago. We service all of the United States, parts of Canada. We do a very kind of functional approach to hormone replacement therapy, and also all of the things that, we want women to be doing as well with that, with lifestyle and stress management and genetics and detoxification and all of these things. So we get this kind of really rounded, holistic care for them. And then I also have a really successful podcast as well, which I think you're going to be coming on. So on my podcast
I
soon.
am. I'm
Yeah,
so
yeah.
excited. That's part of the
Yes.
reciprocity. This will be fun.
I
I think
know.
the
Yeah.
thing that so many women don't understand is our genes are thousands and thousands of years old. And our
Right.
genes look at us and go, oh, we live in the forest. We only eat fresh things. We have no stress unless, a saber-toothed tiger is chasing us. And otherwise, it's the Garden of Eden.
Yeah.
But we live in toxic environments. We live in these boxes. We step outside a box and go into another little box. We drive someplace to go into another box, which we call work. We're there for 6 to 8 to 12 hours. We get back in our little box. We go pick up fast food that is full of all sorts of preservatives and xenobiotics and, hormone disruptors. And then we come back to our little box and we sit in front of a box that entertains us. And then we go sit in a smaller compartment inside our box and go to bed. But we have all this stimulation around us, whether it's a sound machine or whether it's an EMF from our, phone or some artificial light, and how is our DNA going to respond to this? And how are our hormones going to respond to this? Because they're being bombarded with so much. So let's talk about healthy lifestyle for a minute. What the body is meant to have, some of the tricks and tips that you guys recommend for if somebody is listening today and goes, oh my gosh, that's me. I had no idea that I was boxing it. What are a couple things that you recommend that they could change that would already make an impact on their bodies and thus their hormones?
So number one is prioritizing protein. And I know that everybody's hears this and it's kind of falling on deaf ears at this point, but I cannot drive that home enough, especially for women that are in midlife. We need more protein when we go through perimenopause and into menopause. We start losing muscle tissue. And this is one of the reasons we gain weight when we hit menopause. And so it is like top of the list for what every woman, it's a non-negotiable. You've got to eat more protein, and specifically animal protein is best. That's going to give you your sorry to all the vegans out there, it's just the way it goes. If you're vegan, great, then just make sure you're getting complete protein in your diet and that you are also increasing that plant protein as you're going through midlife. It is
Or
so
supplement
important.
with
Or
amino acids
supplement.
where
Absolutely.
you're getting, yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
there's no offense to anyone with a lifestyle choice or a
No.
lifestyle, because I actually have some patients who are alpha gal, and alpha gal, they cannot do any mammal. So there's no beef, no pork, no lamb, but they do chicken and they do fish and egg. And so they're able to do that. And they have to do the beans and rice combos for complete. Now, if it's a choice to be, because you don't want to hurt animals and stuff, you are also an animal. And I will say personally, it did hurt me. And a lot of my sickest patients had very great intents, but they compromised their personal health because they weren't balanced in that. So when you talk about the amount of protein, how much protein are you looking at getting in a day for a person?
Yeah, so very controversial, and you'll hear different opinions on this.
That's
And I
what
think
today
it,
is. It's our opinions and our
right?
experience.
Yeah.
This is not medical advice. This is our life experience and what worked for us.
So I usually recommend that if you are lifting weights, which that's my second thing that I want everybody to be doing as a woman in midlife is lifting weights. That
Look at those biceps, girls.
for those not watching and listening, we are showing our pipes
We
here.
got 'em.
We got them. We're practicing what we're preaching. So if you're lifting weights, you should be trying to aim for a gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight. So when I say ideal body weight, it means like what would you ideally like to be or were at some point in your life for a long extended time. So if that's 130 pounds, then you're going to want to aim for about 130 grams of protein a day. If you're not active and you're not lifting weights, then you can do less than that. So you could do maybe 0.8, 0.7 grams of protein per pound of ideal body weight. Now, that can be hard for some women to do. And I'm one of them. I have a hard time eating a lot of animal protein. I get full really fast from it, which is another reason why we want to be eating it because it is so satiating. And so I do supplement with ketone amino acids. So that there's a couple different ones on the market that are really great because there's no calories in there. And so it's really easy for me just to put a scoop in my water, drink that after my workout or pre-workout. And that's going to give me a good punch of protein in the system. And so that, or I do a whey protein powder in a smoothie or something like that. So I supplement because eating that much in actual food is tough for me.
Yeah. And I'm the same way. I try to tell women, especially if you're just starting, try to get 30 grams of protein at each meal. So
yes.
I used to have just like an egg with breakfast. I'd have some eggs and bacon and maybe a piece of toast. Toast is now gone. First of all, I'm a celiac. Okay. And I've even gotten rid of all the gluten-free toast and stuff. It's just not worth it. Because I've heard you talk about it and other people, they've got their CGMs, they watch it. Grains just blow my sugar. It just, and it's like, so it's just not worth it. So I'll have now, each egg is 10 grams of protein. I'll eat 4 eggs And if I know I'm not going to eat till later in the day, I'll have 6 eggs for breakfast. Now, try going to a restaurant. Now, I actually have chickens, so I have my own eggs. But, occasionally it's fun to go out. And they want to give you a little avocado toast with an egg or 2 eggs. And I'm like, well, I'll take 4 more on the side. And they're like, what? What? And I'm like, yeah, I do. And they're like, are you feeding the table?
Yeah, exactly.
One of my favorite things for people to know is only fat and protein will cause you to be satisfied. And the fat and protein release a hormone. It's one of my favorite hormones. People who've heard me before love when I say this. It's cholecystokinin. And cholecystokinin is what makes you stop feeling hungry. And now it'll take me 15, 20 minutes. So don't eat your carbs first. Don't have all the chips and salsa first. Wait, for either the queso or the beans or the meat with beans. Like if I get bean dip or queso dip, if we go out, I always have a big scoop of beef put in it, whether it's, the shredded or the scrambled or whatever, because then we're getting protein early on with fewer of the carbs or none of the carbs. But that cholecystokinin is going to take 15 to 20 minutes. I will eat a meal and then I'll pause and everyone's like, are you done already? I'm like, just give me a few minutes. Within about 10 minutes or so, I can go phase 2. So I kind of eat my meals in 2 phases because my body starts to digest, starts to process. I don't know about you, but within an hour, I'm nibbly again. So I eat in a tight window because I fast, but I'm eating every couple hours. And once I'm done with the window, I am so satisfied I can do 14 to 16 hours, no problem. So what about you? Are you fasting in this great environment as well?
I am. I don't overdo it because I don't have great, I've got thyroid problems. I've got adrenal issues. So I do try and practice what I preach on that, but stress is a big one for me. But I am very careful now. I used to do longer fasts, but I found that they'd wipe me out and I wouldn't feel well and I wasn't able to get in enough protein. And so now I alternate and going with my cycle, even though I don't have a period every month anymore, I still cycle and I can feel that. And so I know that when my estrogen's higher, I can have a lot easier time fasting than when I'm closer to what would have been my period, when I can feel like I'm more emotional, my cravings are up. I don't feel well at all when I fast on those days. And so I listen to that and I just listen from day to day what my body's telling me if it wants to fast or not. But I try not to overdo it, but then I also try to stop eating by 6 o'clock and I don't eat until 9 a.m. Always.
So for people who may not be familiar or have lost, if you're in that perimenopause or menopause, the beginning of your cycle is the high estrogen cycle. Now, we can look at people's DNAs and see whether they're better at weightlifting, better at running, better at, like you said, fasting then or not fasting then. So for you feel better fasting, when your estrogen is high and your progesterone is low, which would be the early part of your cycle, maybe even days 5 through 10, possibly up to 12. 12 to 14 is when you would normally peak and an egg would release if you were still ovulating. And that's when people start to get a little weird. They're like, because you've got this big progesterone. So I can tell you for me, I do my heavy weightlifting early in my cycle because I can push more. Again, that high estrogen. You're estrogen toxic and estrogen dominant, so you can be more curvy and more emotional, and a little goes a long way. It's kind of like salt and pepper, just a sprinkle. I'm co-dominant, so I have a lot of the androgen as well, which means I can put on that muscle mass, but I get the hormonal fluctuation. So I have to do heavy weights early in my cycle, and then lighter weights, more yoga, more stretching, more stuff late in my cycle. Because like you, I get a little bit like, I just don't feel like it. I just don't have the
energy's a little lower. Yeah. I don't have that motivation like I do in the first half of the cycle. And even testosterone has a little peak in the first half of our cycle too. So all of these hormones, you're going to be more insulin sensitive. So your cravings are down. You're going to have more energy. You actually even are more social because of all that estrogen. So you want to go to the gym and you do those things. Rather, the second half of our cycle, if you're feeling that quietness and wanting to be more introverted, really listen to that. That's telling you something. And that is the time. Progesterone is very calming. And so go and do the yoga, go do the long walks, and don't feel like, oh my God, I got to get that HIIT exercise in, or I got to go, I'm not pushing it hard enough at the gym. Like, give yourself a break. I constantly have to have this dialogue with myself, which is why I'm saying this, because even to this day, knowing all of this, I still will be like beating myself up because it's the week before what would have been my period, and not feeling great and not wanting to work out. And I'll be like, oh man, I just got to go do it. Just go, Karen, go work out. And then I'm like, no, wait, stop. Don't do that. Listen to yourself. Go for a walk. And I go outside. And it's so much better.
It's interesting. There was a book many, many years ago, and you may have heard of it or not. It was called The Red Tent.
Oh my God, I love that book so much.
I love
it. And I wish we all could still do that.
Well, I think we kind of are. So for those of you who haven't read The Red Tent, it was about the women during, please read it first of all. It is a perfect, summertime nurturing, but it's about during your cycle, how the women went into the red tent and the men weren't allowed in, but how they treated each other with such loving and kindness. And they would massage each other or brush each other's hair. They would get the most supple morsels of food. It was that they would laugh and have sistership. And this kind of feels like the indulging of, they rested when their body said rest. They rested when they were losing those nutrients. And I really think the honoring of our natural cycles, I think the honoring of when your body says, I'm just too tired. When we do our DNA 360, part of the profile says you recover quickly or you need more rest and recovery. Mine is like at the flat out bottom. So I just had guests here for almost a week, and then I worked 8 days straight, and I did 12-hour days. So now you're putting in 16, 17 days straight. And yesterday, I collapsed. I literally stayed in bed all day. I sipped on tea. I napped.
So nice.
And I felt lazy. I felt unproductive until I emerged and went, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. And it was just honoring that, okay, we can only do so much and we only need to do so much. We don't have to beat ourselves to a pulp emotionally, physically, or anything else, and not honor.
The menopausal women need to honor this as well, because even if you're not getting a cycle, a lot of women will actually, if they tune into the moon cycle, they'll find that their emotions and how they're feeling start to align with the moon cycles. And even if you don't align with the moon cycles, if you tune in, you will find that you will still be having a somewhat of a cycle where there's certain times, certain weeks of the month, maybe that you're going to feel better than others, or where you're going to hit this spot that you're talking about, where you're just going, I'm done. And listen to that. Go and lie in bed. And, we get so wrapped up in our value and what we're worth by how much we do in a day. Women are horrible for that. So just listen and go lie in bed and drink your tea. Go in your red tent, damn it.
Well, I did, and I wore my red today to prove it.
Yes, I love it.
So emerging from that, one of the great things, you had to find help on your own. I had to find help on my own. Fortunately, we're tenacious enough or just stubborn enough that it was like, I got to get through this, because my blood sugar was all over the place. My brain wasn't working. I was snippy and at 1 minute, and then I would be whiny and teary in another. And I'm like, this just isn't me. Now, finding the DNA company and being able to look and now understand I need rest, and I don't process certain fats well. I don't process dairy well unless it's raw dairy. And, those opened up. It's like, if I had only known this earlier, you can collect $200 and get to the end and go, okay, so now I've got a profile that I can work within, And for people who don't know about the DNA 360, when you look at your DNA, is it every single answer? It is not. It is great insight, though, to say, am I more estrogen, the way Karen is? And so she has to be very careful with when and how and what she does with her estrogen. Or am I more co-dominant, like Stephanie, where I have estrogen and testosterone, and I have to dance between the two. But it allows you to go, oh, that makes so much sense. And then to be able to work with a practitioner that can work with you. Now, I'm going to tell you, I have an issue with a lot of practitioners. There's a lot of people that are tipping their toes in that really haven't done enough deep dive. And I think they can do a little bit of good, but I think they do a lot of harm by just going, here's a one size fits all. So let's talk about your approach on when people should consider starting hormones or looking at their hormones, whether they start over-the-counter supplementation, whether they change their diet that are with phytoestrogens or the natural progesterones, the wild yam creams, versus getting into a practitioner, and how you recommend finding the right practitioner in their area. I'd love to know a little bit more about your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So like you were just saying, there's a lot of majority of practitioners, their thought process around menopause, and this is a lot of primary caregivers of medical doctors, is that women are not allowed to have hormone replacement therapy until they're in menopause. I just worked with a woman a few weeks ago who she's been bleeding every single day for 3 years. Every single day. She has been to 2 gynecologists, a nurse practitioner, and a primary care physician. And every single one of them, she's 51, every single one of them said, you cannot have hormone replacement therapy because you're not in menopause. And so guess what they offered her, and which she took because she was in such dire need. She took a birth control implant in her arm that contained progestin. And that is what is shown in the research to increase a woman's risk of breast cancer, which is really why these doctors are saying this, because they fear that if they give a woman estrogen replacement therapy or any kind of hormone replacement therapy, really, that it's going to increase their risk of developing breast cancer. And this has been disproven over and over and over again, but yet women still don't know about it. But if you replace your estrogen, you can actually have a decrease in developing breast cancer. But if you use birth control pills, including that implant, that will increase your risk of breast cancer and many other problems. So it's really, really frustrating that these doctors don't know about it. But we have to, I think, come to the conclusion of, sure, try with your doctor, but be ready to move on, because doctors are not trained in perimenopause at all. And less than 7% are trained in menopause. And so you can imagine how many of them don't have training.
Yeah, they get 6 weeks of nutrition. So when I talk to practitioners all day long, especially medical doctors or nurse practitioners or PAs, and we end up talking biochemistry, they're like, you know more than I know about biochemistry. And I said, well, part of that is the whole drug thing, because I learned the biochemistry as a pharmacist. But part of it is because the practical application is so beneficial. And they're like, great, then just handle it, because they know how to symptom stomp, and they know how to sprinkle it on and then step back and go, let's hope. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't a lot of wonderful doctors. There are, and I have a lot of wonderful doctor friends, but they're so niched in. I have one friend who actually does some hormones, but he does male hormones primarily. And I laughed because he said, Stephanie, men come in, they're like, take my level, tell me when my next shot is, in and out in 4 minutes. And he goes, I get paid the same amount for that as a woman who wants to sit and tell me all of her symptoms for 45 minutes and go on and tell me about her day and her ups and downs. And he goes, you know, he goes, I'd rather just focus on the guys, in and out. Here's your shot. Here's to prevent losing your hair. Here's to keep the penis up. Yeah. He goes, boom, boom, boom. He goes, that's my niche. And he just was like, whoa. Now he sees me because I actually educate him, and he's like, every time we go in, we have a little seminar. But the powerful part of that is your practitioner listening to you? Mm-hmm. Do they have solutions, and do they understand the mechanisms? If you're not understanding the mechanisms, how and why, as you said, they get 6 weeks of nutrition, and then the Women's Health Initiative, which poo-pooed hormones, has been disproven. But was there a splash on that? Did it say, hey, everybody out there who has a chance to write hormones, guess what? We were wrong. Now you can do them. No, there was none of that. It was, I guess we were wrong. And so the word hasn't gotten out to the medical community. And when I say to them, all that was disproven. That all of that has been retracted. They're like, no, when was that?
Exactly.
But just importantly, if you haven't seen it yet, and I hope you have, in the Journal of Menopause, just in May of 2024, the Medicare study with 10 million charts.
Yeah.
And all the positive benefits, even for all the hormones, and not all of them I agree with, the methods or the type, but literally 4-to-1, 5-to-1, even 2-to-1, the benefits way outweigh the risks.
Yeah, they saw the same results from the WHI as they did in the they call it the 1 million study or the 7 million study or something, but they took 1 million out of those 7 million, I think, that they saw were on hormones, researched them all. And yeah, you're right. Both the WHI and that study, there was a lot of women in the WHI, they were all on Premarin, which is old HRT. But even so, it showed this amazing reduction in all-cause mortality by up to 33%, a reduction in breast cancer by 24%. And the 1 million study also had the same results, that all these cancers went down, all these other causes of mortality went down, and same 23 or 24% reduction in breast cancer cases. And that if these women did go on to get breast cancer, they had a 45% reduction in dying from that breast cancer if they had taken estrogen. So are we hearing this? Like, doctors should be telling every woman that is hitting perimenopause, oh my gosh, make sure you get on these hormones because it's going to preserve your brain, your bones, your breasts. No, we're not. We're being told, don't you dare go on hormone replacement therapy. It's going to kill you. And it's just maddening. But we need to go, okay, if my doctor doesn't know this information, time to move on. Don't get frustrated. It's not that they're not being taught this. And so it's not their place for some of them. And they have to pay to get that education, and which most of them aren't willing to do. So move on and know that there's other places that you can go get help for that is affordable. You don't have to pay huge amounts of money for it. There's things that you can do on your own to help with this process, this midlife journey, to make it the best time ever. And so know that that's your options. And going back to your question there, when we're in our late 30s, early 40s, there's lots that we can do that's not hormone replacement therapy to help preserve those ovaries and kind of wring out all the last bit of those hormones. And I did that. I think you did that as well, where, I took really good menopause supplements that had phytoestrogens in them, black cohosh, sage, dong quai, and it did wonders for me in those early years. Got rid of my hot flashes, helped with the weight gain. Like, I felt really good. And there's, you can take Vitex. It can help with your progesterone production and vitamin C. And there's all these amazing tools, just changing your diet, watching your stress levels. All of those things can really help in those early years of perimenopause. But please know that as you start to really lose those hormones, and you have to remember that we don't produce the bulk of our progesterone unless we ovulate. So most women will stop ovulating as often when they're in their late 30s, early 40s, we start to lose those eggs. That's a typical age. This can happen earlier, it can happen later, but that's the typical age. Then once you run out of those eggs, they're gone. You're not ovulating anymore. That progesterone takes a serious dive. And at that point, you cannot diet your way out of it. You can't exercise your way out of it. Nothing will resolve and bring back those hormone levels. It's not going to make you ovulate anymore. Your progesterone's not going to suddenly start shooting out of some other organ or anything. We can produce a little bit out of, the spinal cord, our brain, our adrenal system, but it's minuscule. Like, you will never see it on labs. I know you've probably done tons of labs. Like, do you ever see a woman who is in menopause with any progesterone if she's not on hormone replacement therapy? No. And so when practitioners, a lot of health practitioners will say, we just need to baby the adrenals and watch your stress because this is where your estrogen and progesterone are going to come from now in menopause. Like, I'm telling you, it does not work. I never, ever have seen that. It's too small amounts. It's too small amounts to get the health benefits. We know from the research, estrogen has to be in a certain range to get the internal benefits. Once again, we're being told these little tiny baby amounts if you are going to take it to get rid of your hot flashes and your vaginal dryness. But what about on the inside? Or what about for the women that don't have hot flashes or vaginal dryness? And they're like, I feel good in menopause. I don't get my hormones, but I feel good right now. I don't have any symptoms. Can you feel your bones starting to deteriorate? That happens way before you hit menopause. Can you feel, that the brain is starting to, because that can be a really slow process where you don't even realize it, where it's like, I can't find my words properly. And, I'm not as smart as I used to be. And it slowly creeps up to one day, oh, you've got, early onset dementia, and this is really what happens to so many women. And so we know that we have estrogen receptors on, in every organ. We have them in our eyes, for heaven's sakes. We have them on our skin. You want anti-aging, ladies? Hello, watch your estrogen. It helps you make collagen. It helps with the fine lines. We need these hormones for more than just fertility, sex drive, and hot flashes.
Absolutely. So it's interesting. A lot of people are wanting to add, but I also think you touched on something a moment ago that I want to go back to is, what do we need to take out? Because I am so big on diet. And a lot of people don't want to, well, I have a good diet. Okay, well, what do you consider a good diet? Well, so how are your sugars? Again, because I work in the everyday clinic world as well as the whole DNA world, people will come in for their fluconazole for their yeast infection, or they'll come in for their nitrofurantoin for their yeast infection or for their urinary tract infection. And it's like, well, wait a minute. This is your third round in 4 months. Let's talk about what's causing this and how much sugar do you have in your diet? And they're like, I don't have any sugar, but they're having fruited yogurt for breakfast. They have a piece of fruit for lunch. They have, their pasta or their rice with their sushi. And, and then they might have their cocoa or a little ice cream at night. And I'm like, honey, all you're having
and half
is
a
sugar.
bottle of red wine. How about that?
I said, all you're having is sugar. And they're like, what? Because they don't think if they're adding it, or they don't think the fake creamer, but I use Coke Zero. Okay, well, it's still impacting your blood sugar. So what are the things you would have people take out or recognize? Okay, they're adding the good stuff in. What we've agreed today is we're going to up our protein. I can hear everybody going, okay, check, up protein, check, got to lift some heavy shit, check, got to do it in the beginning of the month when I feel good. And when I don't, I can stretch, check, okay, so I see that they've got them. What do you want them to remove from their diet or from their lifestyle to help with these hormone flows?
Mm-hmm. So I try not to be dogmatic about diet. I used to be, and I used to think everybody needs to be paleo. It's the best thing ever because it's what worked for me. And then I realized actually, no, everybody's an individual and we all can tolerate different amounts of carbohydrates in our diet and grains and things like that. So now I'm a little bit more flexible, but I will say we still see that women in midlife are do become more insulin resistant. And this is because of the loss of estrogen. Typically we lose estrogen, and estrogen really helps us to process blood glucose, helps with eating behavior, it helps with being more insulin sensitive. And so as that starts to go down, women who are like perfect health, nuts, they eat perfectly, they always had perfect blood sugar and insulin, myself included, my blood sugar went up. And I was like, whoa, no, I've had perfect blood sugar my whole life. Yeah, you too, Stephanie. So when we start going through this, we have to really watch our intake of carbohydrates. Now, if you've got adrenal problems, insufficiency, and thyroid problems that are not being treated, which is also very common in women in midlife, our thyroid starts to go down just like the other hormones. Going super low carb, ketogenic, or carnivore for long periods of time and doing a ton of fasting could backfire and could cause a lot of problems. And so it's really about, once again, going, where am I at hormonally? And then trying to find this nice combination of, I love the 80-20 theory. Some people can't do 80-20. They got to be 100%. But if you can be 80-20, great. And that's 80% where you're going to eat a whole foods diet. And a lot of us can't afford to eat the grains anymore. So it's got to be more of a paleo based diet where you do remove the grains. Getting your genetics tested is amazing for this. I've done whole podcasts about this where look at your genes. Like I remember being told on one of my my DNA results, it was like, oh, you can tolerate dairy. And I'm like, yes, but can't tolerate gluten. And I'm like, yeah, I knew this, but it took me 20 years to figure that out, And so you can save yourself a lot of time and energy by just going, what's my body built for? My body and my genetics says I need more protein. I don't do well with gluten. I do fine with dairy, so I was able to look at that. Oh, and that I had the fat gene, I think they call it, where it was like,
Yeah.
you can't tolerate a lot of carbs. And it's like, no, I can't. And I knew that. So looking at that can be really helpful to go, okay, let's have this as a base.
Yeah, or
What's
the
that one?
AMY1 gene, when you've got such great starch metabolism, we metabolize it into sugar, and then the insulin spikes, and insulin is storage, and you just pack those on, and it just tastes so good. I mean,
probably have
that's
that
when
too.
people say, I can look at a cupcake and gain 5 pounds.
Yes, I swear that's me too. But yes, I think because we become more inflamed, we become more insulin resistant, we see cholesterol going up because of the loss of our hormones. And, obviously bad diet is going to contribute to that, but we really do have to be more mindful. We don't want to drink alcohol. That's a really big thing that I really try and get women to at least slow down on. We're seeing out there that every age demographic has lowered in their alcohol consumption, except for middle-aged women. And that's really sad. And I think because it's really glamorized right now in social media, is like,
Well,
oh,
and
drink
I
your
will
wine,
also
drink your
say,
wine.
because I'll have people say, can I have a glass of wine? And I'll say, there are a few alcohols that if you're going to drink that are cleaner and better
Yes.
than that. So I have 2 girlfriends who either owned wineries or ran wineries. And I didn't realize, and they're in Southern California and the whole, Paso Robles area and Ojai area, that there are up to 200 additives that don't have to be listed on the label of the wine that can cause
Wow.
all sorts of disruption. I would drink a glass of wine, and this was very good wine from very good wineries, and my feet would swell. I mean, I literally would go up a whole size, or everything just felt like sausage puffy. And I got to the point where I was like, nothing tastes as good as feeling good feels. So I cut all wine out. You know, I'm a celiac. I can't have beer. I cut all beer out. There are some, gluten-free beers, but it's not worth it. For women, if you're going to have something, a lot of the mixology cocktails are just sugar, sugar, sugar. Okay. So it's got to be clean and white. In fact, if you look at, whether it is a vodka with club soda or a tequila with club soda, literally the only alcohol that I'll drink if I'm going to splurge is like a skinny margarita, but mine is a mezcal, an artisanal mezcal. So that means it is small produced, it is local, there are no additives, and that's kind of a smoky tequila, and they're sipping kind of things. I might put a little Topo Chico because I like the mineral taste of the Topo Chico, and a squeeze of lime. Now, if I'm really splurging, I'll take a little bit of crushed pineapple and I'll put a couple pieces in there, But it's like, I feel satisfied. I feel, I don't feel deprived. And guys, this is not about deprivation. We're not telling you all the things you can't do. We're giving you the insights of what we've been through to say, this is what worked, that I could maintain the health, maintain the brain, maintain the muscle, drop the 20 pounds. Because like you, I put on 20 pounds. I swore I would never be one of those women. Oh, they were so cute in their 40s and I got in their 50s and whoop. And I didn't realize as soon as my estrogen dropped, as soon as I started having the night sweats, or I couldn't sleep, or the crankiness, or I'd start missing my periods. And then my waist went from a 27 to a 32. And I'm like, what the heck? Now I didn't go above the 20 pounds, but I'm 5'9", and I was consistently 132, 135 pounds. All of a sudden I'm 155 pounds. And I went from my loose 6s to I'm pushing a 10. And again, there's nothing wrong with being an 8 or 10 at all. But when you're used to being a type 4 or a loose 6, and all of a sudden you go, I can't wear anything in my closet. I don't feel good in my body. I don't want to be intimate with my spouse. I don't like who I am. That's when the antidepressants come on. That's when the self-loathing behavior comes on. That's when you retreat from the world. But girls, that's when you got to have girlfriends and dig in. That's when it says, somebody's got more information than I have. How do I find them? If I've got an idea and you've got an idea and we put our heads together, we can change people's paradigm. We can give them the information we didn't have. There's nothing more than I want them to share this information and get out of it so much faster than
I have women I just had a woman in my group the other day who said, I haven't left my house barely at all for a year because I'm so embarrassed about what happened to my body in menopause.
Oh,
That's soul crushing. That's so sad.
it is.
Or another client who said, I haven't had sex with my husband for 2 years because the last time we had sex, my inside of my vagina tore. And yet I'm like, why hasn't anybody helped you for 2 years?
Yeah.
Once again, could you imagine if that was a man? Oh, my penis is tearing when I have sex. Like doctors would be like, oh my God, get you some testosterone now. Like it wouldn't just be like
the other day coming to pick up vaginal cream. It was her first time. It was an estradiol vaginal cream. Her insurance would not pay for it without a prior authorization. $457. And she said, I hurt so much, I will pay anything. She buys the medicine. She leaves the pharmacy window. We get a phone call from the husband. Did you just charge my credit card $457? We went, we did. Your wife just picked up, a prescription. He said, she's bringing it back. She didn't get to the front door that she didn't turn around and get a call. And he goes, I don't care what that is. You got to take it back. And she came back all flustered, well, nobody told me it was this much. Well, yes, ma'am, you knew it because you had to sign the receipt. But because she hadn't left the pharmacy, we were allowed to take it back. And we said, okay, let's find other ways. Let's find other creams. We can still get you this. But I had to step in and go, here's what you asked for. Here's how you asked for it. Here's how you get the authorization. She was so desperate to have anything because she was hurting so badly. And yet the response was, come hell or high water, we're not buying that shit. And it was like, I walked down and gave her a hug and I said, we'll get you through this. We'll get you through it. She goes, nobody explained this to me. How come they don't know that that's what it was going to be? And it's because women and a lot of insurance companies, they'll pay for Viagra. They'll pay for all that. But then it comes to this. They're like, you're on your own, girls.
Yeah. A woman that I worked with, she went to get her estriol suppositories, which, just so you guys know, estriol is dirt cheap. And her suppositories cost her, same thing, it was $350 for a month. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me. And this is in Canada too, which we have less expensive drugs than you guys do. But that is uncalled for. Like that just, oh my gosh, it makes me so mad. I came up with my own line of over-the-counter hormone cosmetic creams. One of them is a facial cream that's got a high dose of estradiol and estriol in it. And,
we're going to have to talk about that. I like that.
It's amazing for the face. But I've had so many women contact me and tell me that they've been using it on their vagina. And they're like, is this okay? And I'm like, look, it's not made for the vagina, so I cannot say that. But if it's working for you, it's to each his own.
Baby. Let me know.
Right? And that's like, it's $59 for a bottle it's got 70 full pumps in it. So if you're just using it a little down below, a little on top, it's going to last you for months at that price. Yeah. So great for the face, which is why I did it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's actually good to know. I think it's really important that women understand that they do their annual checks. Now I've got a couple different takes on annual checks as well, but I think the number one annual check they need to do is their hormone metabolites. Tell us how in your clinic you guys are checking metabolites, because I think it is a abomination and almost criminal. I mean, we'll check your lipids and then we want to suppress them, and cholesterol is the mother hormone, so you're not going to make any more hormones when you're suppressing your cholesterol, but we're not checking the metabolites to see how our hormones are turning out. And we've got good metabolites and bad metabolites, and the ratios are important, and how those ratios go down. They're almost like racetracks. This racetrack is blocked off and needs to detour, and it goes down a wrong pathway. So tell us how your clinic looks at those hormone pathways and metabolites, and what tests you do.
They're really, if you can afford to do these, because it's not cheap, unfortunately. Another thing that's very expensive. It is a really, really good thing to see at some point. So even if you just did one, so we can see what your body is preferring as far as the pathways, because there's many pathways that your estrogen can be metabolized down, that your testosterone can be metabolized down. And it is nice to be able to see what you need in order to support those systems, because every one of us is different. Some women have problems with methylation, and if you're not doing your DNA test, you might not know this. Yeah, same. I lean on the side of what's called the 5-alpha reductase side, which means I convert a lot of my testosterone to dihydrotestosterone. So if I use a lot of testosterone, I can start breaking out in acne and getting greasy skin and losing my hair, which, if I was somebody that decided to go try pellets for the first time ever for testosterone replacement therapy, which they put these things inside your body and you can't get them out for 3 months, and it's high doses of testosterone. I would have been one of the ones that would have put on so much weight. I get super water retentive. My genetics show that I don't have the UGT 17, or what is it? The UGTB17, is it? Pathway. And so I'm missing 2 SNPs. So I don't process my testosterone very well. And so it makes me really water retentive. And so if you don't know these things before you go do something like a pellet, you could get really screwed and it's not fun. And I've had women go, oh my gosh, I just put on 20 pounds since I put this pellet in me, or my clitoris has enlarged and I'm getting acne and I'm losing my head hair. Like, this isn't fun. This isn't good. So we really like to do both serum testing and urine metabolite testing at the same time for women that are in perimenopause or their fertile years. In menopause, we don't recommend doing it until you're on hormone replacement therapy, because you could be wasting your money. Because if you don't have estrogen, which if you've been in menopause for a while and your estrogens are really low, the tests aren't super accurate because you don't have enough to show where is it pushing down these metabolite pathways, and they'll just all be at zero and we'll just be like, meh. And so, these tests are $500 a test. And so you don't want to waste your money. So I always say, if you're, well into menopause or in menopause, wait till you're on hormone replacement therapy. Then at some point in that first year, do one if you can afford to do it, so that you can make sure that you're pushing down the proper pathways, because there's pathways that are more toxic than other ones that they see that women that do develop breast cancer will have higher levels, for instance, of metabolite called 4-hydroxylation, and that we want to be pushing it down more of the 2-hydroxylation. And there are supplements that we can take that can push you down these different, more safer pathways. And so that's important. And a lot of the supplements that are recommended for these things that are kind of just blanket recommendations, for instance, D-indole-methane, it's one of the most highly recommended supplement for women. And it's like, oh my gosh, DIM. It's like, everybody get on DIM. And I have all these menopausal women on DIM. And yet DIM is going to get you out of that 4-hydroxylation into a 2-hydroxylation pathway. But if you don't have any problems in phase 1 and your problem is methylation in phase 2, that can cause some problems. The other thing is D-indole-methane, DIM, can lower estrogen, which if you're in menopause or perimenopause and you're starting to lose your estrogen, you do not want to quicken that process up. You want to hold on for dear life to every little drip of estrogen you've got, because as we've talked about here today, it's the estrogen loss that causes the most amount of weight gain and the most amount usually of side effects from perimenopause.
So for people who like the science, a couple things to know. When estrogen goes through the liver, there's a 2-pass effect. The first pass effect is an activation and oxidation, but it makes estrogen more toxic. Now it has to go through this, but then it has to go back through the second pass effect with the methylation, the glucuronidation, and all of that will make it less toxic. A lot of people get stuck at that more toxic level because they're not methylating or glucuronidation and stuff. So we've got to make sure that our detox pathways are open and flowing. That includes poop. I call it the Asian nation. Glucuronidation, oxidation, defecation, urination, respiration, breathing deep. You've got sweating, perspiration. You've got to have all those Asians going in that Asian nation so you can drive it through. Yes, there are foods you can eat. There are activities you can do, whether it's a sauna or something, they get all of those going. But you got to know the pathway. I love it that you say that you don't waste your time maybe on a Dutch test unless you're on the exogenous hormones, because a lot of people hear BRCA. And they're like, I've got the BRCA, I can never do this. That's actually not true. BRCA genes actually prevent tumors from developing. But the problem is that if you're going down the wrong pathway, no amount of BRCA can protect you. The studies that were done showed, okay, here was a BRCA gene and this person had breast cancer. And then they said, well, then that must be causing it. No, it was the lack of detoxification. And so maybe, I know we're getting to the nearer end of our time, maybe the next time we'll talk about, okay, so we've got all these how to recognize, we've got all these beginning steps. Maybe we can talk about getting you to come back and we say, watch phase 1. Now we're going to do phase 2. And how do we detox? How do we decide what kind of supplement? How do we decide, And then where do we play with it? I had a gal who started the other day with a topical estrogen. Within 2 days, her clitoris had ballooned almost like a big zit. And she's like, ah,
Wow.
she's like, okay. And I said, well, you're we know you can go into estrogen toxicity. Let's back off, and
Yeah.
it's a bit of a delicate dance. We
Yep.
cut it in half. We had her stop for a day. We cut it in half. Now she's like, oh, lubrication's coming back. Oh, skin is tightening. Oh, and she's having, but the regular dose or the regular level was just too much for her and the way she processes.
Yes. And
She
every
had
one of
also,
us is different.
yeah, she'd also been on hormones for 3 years and I don't like combos where it was estradiol, progesterone, testosterone, all in one. It's like,
Oh, I hate that.
and I'm like, no. But
No.
her doses were so low on some things and too high on the others because she had this pre-packed. And I'm like, it may seem like a pain, but putting a little here and putting a little here and being able to control today's good and today's not. And she said, oh my gosh, what a difference. It's kind of like cooking where it's like a little dash here and a little dash here. And I know what my main recipe is, but today I need a little more. And she's like, what a difference. What a difference in how I feel and how I think and how I respond and, how I feel.
Yes, exactly. Oh, it is. And I do actually really do pay attention a lot to the genetics if they have done a genetic report, because what I find is women that are super androgenic, and you can tell an androgenic woman just by looking at her. I always compare me and my sister. I'm estrogenic, she's androgenic. She's up and down, no hips, no breasts, can't put on a pound of weight it doesn't matter how much sugar she eats, super wiry, muscular without even trying. And then there's me, super round, like you can put on a weight by just looking at a cookie, have the hips and the boobs. And so when I start losing my estrogen on labs, it can look fantastic. A doctor would be like, oh, you're fine. You're in range, because estrogen's range is like, oh, if you're anywhere from 50 to 400, you're fine. But for me, a little drop makes a big difference. And so for me, I really feel it, and I'll get the hot flashes and night sweats and weight gain and stomach, the meno belly. And so I needed to start replacing my estrogen way before I started to lose the period. Right. So I started losing the period. I went on hormone replacement therapy, got it back to a regular cycle. And I continued to be on that estrogen, because if I didn't, all these symptoms would start coming back and I'd start to lose my period again. Rather, my sister, her estrogen can go down. She doesn't even notice. Her testosterone, though, goes down, and then she gets all these horrible symptoms. And so we have to be really watching that testosterone and making sure that it's topped up to where she feels her best. So every single one of you is going to feel your best at certain levels. And then we also, once you're in menopause, we want to make sure that you feel great, but that all of these hormones are at levels that are going to protect you from all of the major killers that are coming down the pipeline, like heart disease, osteoporosis, Alzheimer's, dementia. And so we do see that they have to get to certain levels. And then from there, you can go, okay, I still don't feel great, even though my level's at this good number for my bones. I might just be somebody that needs to go higher, or I might need to be on a rhythmic dose of hormones, right? There's ones that are the Wiley protocol or physiologic restoration, where they're trying to kind of mimic what your cycles and your amounts that you'd be producing as a younger woman. And some women, that's what they have to do to feel their best. Well, others are super sensitive, and they're just going to do the minimal that gives them that protection, because anything more, they don't feel well, or they start gaining weight, or they have adverse symptoms. So really, it's about having somebody there that's going to work with you as an individual, and that helps you figure out what's going to work best for you. Some of you'll just hop on these hormones and static dosing, boom, here you go, and you do great, and woo! I don't like you, but no, I have.
Sister, give us something to shoot for.
Yeah, I just don't want it to sound like it's all doom and gloom, that it's really, really hard, because for some women it's super easy and they just have no problems with the hormones. But know that if you are having issues with them, that there's always a solution. I have yet to find a woman where we haven't been able to dial it in some way, shape, or form, whether that's with dosage, how you're delivering it, with, supplementation to support different metabolic pathways. And there's always a way to figure out what's going to work for you personally so that you can get the most out of it and feel your best during this time. Because, ladies, this can be the best time of your life. Like, trust me, it does not have to be 10 years of suffering that most of us are being told that we have to do. These can be the best times of your life. And when you have a great sex drive and you have lots of energy and you've got lots of time for yourself, your kids are older, you've picked your husband or your partner for life at that point sometimes. And so it's about you, and you can start taking care of you and saying, what do I want now?
It is. It's fabulous at 50 and sexy at 60.
There we
and you can
go.
feel that, you can look that, you can have the body you want, but it
Yes.
takes you paying attention to you. It takes you prioritizing you. And yeah, if we all had unlimited money, we could have all this stuff all the time. But pick the things that make the biggest impact. Pick quality food, clean up your environment, make sure you're getting enough sleep. There's a lot of things you can do that are in your control, that are not expensive. They take effort, not money. And if you will clean up that, get outside, get some sunshine, make sure your vitamin D levels are high. Utilize whatever you have in the way of your health care or your reimbursement, and then prioritize, instead of a new dress or a new pair of shoes, prioritize a test that can make you feel better, or prioritize a healthy cream like your estrogen cream that's going to give the vibrance to your face. It doesn't matter how much makeup you have on, it's the sparkle in your eye. And so if your skin is shiny and your eyes are bright, nobody cares what your hip measurement is. I know you care and we love you for it, but you know what? People want to see this. When the energy that you give off because your hormones are regulated, because you feel vibrant and you share and you interact, that's what people get from you. And that's what they want, whether it's your kids or your spouse or partner or your friends. They want your interaction. And it is okay to feel vulnerable and say, I just don't feel good right now and I don't know where to turn. And turn them on to a podcast like this. Turn them on to Karen's other podcasts. Listen to some more with the DNA company. We'll give you so many tips and actionable steps, and make those priorities, because you can come out of this. I came out of it. I lost the 20 pounds. I'm sexier at 60 than I was at 40. Woo!
I'm sexier at 48 than I was at 40.
There you go. My hair keeps getting curlier. And I just say, I said, it just keeps getting kinkier, just like me. The older I get, the kinkier it gets.
Exactly. I feel like we're walking examples of what we're talking about, that it can happen. We're not coming from a place of never having gained weight and just sailing through menopause without any symptoms. No, we had it really, really hard and had all of these things happen to us. And we've come out the other side to say, hey, you don't have to suffer. There's solutions.
That's right. Had the cancer, had the depression, had the weight gain, and just found a way to find my biochemistry, check my DNA, and then it's just practice, practice, practice. And do you have to be perfect? You do not. This is not about perfection. It's about progress. And it's about finding people who dug in and are just one or two steps ahead of you. And with that, Karen, I want to say this has been an absolute delight. I look forward to having you back for that detox talk, and I look forward to be on yours. And seeing what we can do together to help women feel so much better, to gain their lives back, and to make themselves a priority. With that, any closing words for you tonight?
Well, I just want to say thank you, because anybody that I meet that's on the same mission as me of let's educate women and trying to get this information out there because it's lacking. I'm just so grateful for people like yourself and for having this podcast and this platform to share the good word about how we can survive, and not just survive, but thrive in perimenopause and menopause.
Absolutely. Take care. God bless. We appreciate you all. Go out and get healthy.